What's up, guys? Welcome to Bible Study this week. I'm so excited for Christmas is coming up when we get to celebrate Christ's birth. And so for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be looking at the Bible and we're going to look at Christ's birth in the Bible. As I was doing a little bit of reading, I discovered that there are a lot of people out there who don't even believe that Jesus was a real person, like that he just never even existed. It was a whole made-up thing, which is kind of crazy given all the extra biblical evidence of Jesus. And in other words, outside of the Bible, there's also evidence that Jesus existed. There are many Jewish rabbis who wrote about Jesus and about his followers, and that they didn't like Jesus and that they didn't like his followers, but they never denied his existence. There's also archaeology. So like people have dug and they've found the hometown of Jesus in Nazareth. They also found King Herod's tomb. King Herod was the guy who tried to have Jesus killed as a baby. And there's tons more stuff over in Israel where they have dug and they found the facts that are in the Bible to be true. There's also all kinds of different written accounts from people who were not followers of Jesus that corroborated these stories in the Bible about Jesus' existence, that he was a Jew, that he had followers, that he was executed on orders from the Roman governor Pontius Pilate during Emperor Tiberius' reign over the whole Roman world. There was two guys in particular, a guy named Josephus and another guy named Tacitus. One was a Jewish guy, a historian, and another one was a Roman senator and historian. So these guys, they didn't follow Jesus, they didn't believe he was God, but they do agree that he existed and that the story in the Bible is generally true. So, in other words, no real scholars or historians believe that Jesus never existed or that it was made up. So, we know that Jesus existed, but what's really fascinating to me and what I want to dive into today in our scripture reading is that there's a book written, and it's by this guy Isaiah who existed long time before Jesus. He was an Israelite, and he wrote this book. And in this book of Isaiah, 700 years before Jesus was born, he actually describes who Jesus is. He describes Jesus as the Messiah. And there are many more verses and different books that describe Jesus. But in this passage, it's predictive that Jesus would come. And so I want to read to you from Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. Just read to you what it says. I want you to think about what's being read and think about Jesus and who he is and how he's described. So it says, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders," meaning he'll be like a leader, right? "And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. The greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. And the zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this." So what's crazy to me is that this was written 700 years before Jesus was born, right? And the King Herod, who tried to have Jesus killed as a baby boy, knew about this scripture, and that's why he tried to kill him, right? So how do we know that it's talking about Jesus? Well, it says that it was a child who was going to be born, that it was a son who was given. And then it goes in and it calls this child a Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. So all of these names that were later attributed to who Jesus was. The governing, his leadership, his kingship, that he's the boss man, right? That he was in the line of David. So King David, right, would have been like his great times 15 grandfather, right? And Jesus was in the line of David. He was in that line. And so He established his kingdom, and it has never ended. He reigns forever and ever and ever, right? So as we get into the Christmas season, celebrating Christ's birth, who is Jesus to you? In other words, how is it possible that Jesus existed as a person in history and yet was described and predicted 700 years earlier prior to being born? Like, how does that happen? Who else could Jesus be besides what it says here? Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Prince of Peace, the child who was born in Bethlehem, right? In the line of David, the Messiah. So I want to challenge you to think about that this Christmas season. Who is Jesus to you? Who is Jesus to me? And I'll see you next week.